Hey, welcome back everybody. Hayden Crabtree here. Today we're going to be talking about something that recently happened in my life, a true tenant nightmare. Okay, and this is what happens in the life of a real estate investor, the life of an apartment investor, a single family home investor. This happens to a lot of different people. I'm going to talk about why I do self-storage units now and how this is kind of parlayed over into that. But before we get started, before we dive into my recent experience, do a little story time. If you guys haven't already got my best-selling book, Skip to Flip, Secrets the 1% Know About Real Estate Investing, you can do that absolutely free. PDF or audiobook copy, I give away for free. The link is in the description, okay? So also hit that like button for me real quick so I can do more and more of these so I can grow the channel. Super appreciate it if you hit the like button, share with a friend, and subscribe to the channel, okay? So let's dive in. What recently happened to me that I would describe as a tenant nightmare? So one of the first properties that I ever bought fully on my own was a 6-unit residential property. It's 2 different parcels. It's got 3 units on one side and 3 units on the other side, okay? And this property has been a great property for me. But whenever I bought the property, we had something in there called a legacy tenant. Really, I had legacy tenants in all of them, but this one person in particular has been in there for several years now, and they just came up at the end of this last year, end of 2020, for their lease renewal. And at the end of their lease renewal, we like to do property inspections just to see how the property is, what the condition is, before, essentially what the process is with my property management company is if the tenant hasn't yet re-signed their lease, said they're going to re-sign the lease, we like to do a property inspection just to make sure what the property needs in case they don't re-sign and we have to go out and market the property to rent to somebody else. So in that process, did a property inspection. This is a legacy tenant, and they've been in there since the entire duration I've owned the property, and oh my gosh, this property was in horrible shape, beyond just normal repairs and normal, non-cleanliness. This tenant in particular had always kind of left some trash on the outside of their property that we'd say, continuously, hey, keep the front yard clean, keep this thing picked up, right? And they had lived here a long time, so, they really liked the property. It was highly likely that they wanted to renew, but they hadn't yet pulled the trigger on it, and I'm so glad that we did this property inspection because whenever the property managers entered the inside of the home, it was a complete disaster, okay? I'm talking about, wear a mask in there. This place is really bad. This tenant had kind of let the normal maintenance and repairs go way beyond where it should have been. Things that they should have reported, they didn't report. Things that needed fixing, a long time ago, they'd kind of just never said anything about it, and that really compounds, in physical construction. If you have a problem, you always want to fix that problem as soon as possible because one problem, if you don't fix it, can turn into another problem, can turn into another problem, can turn into another problem. Just a really bad all-around situation. So I knew that this was going to be a big chunk of money out of my pocket whenever we did actually go to fix these repairs, right? This was going to cost me a lot of money, and I wished, along the way they had just told me about the repairs that were needed. That would have cost me a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there, because overall I, as the property owner, would have saved money, but they didn't do that, right? This tenant just didn't feel the need to let us know about all these different things, like water that was leaking or, subfloor repairs that needed. So subfloor, you have what separates and you put hardwood over it. So subfloors, can start to rot out over time, needs to be replaced. It's completely normal on older homes, but you really need to fix it whenever that happens or else the subfloor continues to grow and need more and more repair. Kind of the long end of it is we just got done fixing this property that needed so much work, and the total cost, instead of a couple $100 here, a couple $100 there, the total cost was actually about $10,000 just to fix up this one unit. And that hurts really bad because this single family home was renting for $550. Is a little bit more outside of town, and so $550. It was it's a 2-1, and that's really expensive. 10 grand in repairs for something that rents for $500. So that really hurt. But kind of the good news here is that I saw this opportunity that this property was gonna need some work. I was gonna have to put some money into it. So I had the option of saying, hey, do I want to put $7,000 into this thing to bring it up to where it needs to be to where I want to rent, or do I want to go a little bit more above and beyond, in terms of making this nice whenever I'm having people out there doing work, and do I want to spend, the extra couple $1,000 to really put nicer finishes on this, have it done the right way, and repair some things that, or replace some things that could have been repaired, right? Sometimes in real estate, you have to determine, do I want to repair what's out there or do I want to replace what's out there? And that's really a decision you have to make And really what this all comes back around to is you need to be careful when and how you spend money in real estate investing, because some things that you spend money on will add value to properties and some things that you spend money on will not add value to property. And you have to understand the difference. And so value in this case is, can I rent the property for more money, right? So I decided to go through and spend money on tasks and items instead of just repairing, replacing some things like the bathrooms and some items in the kitchen, right? So that we could actually rent this property for more money. So the good news about this Tenant Nightmare is I wish they just told me that we needed to replace some things as we go through, but they didn't, and it really compounded. And I knew that I was going to have to spend $6,000, $7,000 anyways just to get this thing back to where I could rent it. But then I decided to go a little bit above and beyond and put the extra couple $1,000s in it. And so the good news is that I moved from a rental rate of $500 up to a rental rate of $750 because I decided to put a little more money into the property, make it a little bit nicer. I've actually gone through and increased the value of this property. And so $250 a month of extra rental income. So $250 a month is $3,000 a year of extra income. And so I really don't have any extra expenses associated with that, right? If I had to put the money in up front and I just am getting a higher rental rate on an ongoing basis, that all that extra money just goes into my pocket. So that's an extra $3,000 a year that this unit is going to generate for me just for making a little bit nicer and increasing the rents. So I'm really, really happy to announce that $250 a month or $3,000 a year is going to increase the value of my rental property by what I think is more than what I put into it. So when tenant nightmares happen, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And you really have to determine, do I just want to get it back to where I can fix it and rent it out, or do I want to go above and beyond and try and make this a little bit nicer? Because the life of a real estate investor is tenant nightmares happen. That's just the truth. That's a risk of being a real estate investor, is that people are going to trash your property. And it doesn't matter how hard you try and screen tenants, and especially when you inherit legacy tenants, you really have to be careful about how that person's going to treat your property and making sure you're on top of that, because this could have compounded. It could have kept going and kept going, and instead of looking at $7,000, I could have looked at $17,000 or $27,000 on this property, and then I really have to determine how valuable is this to me, and can I get my money back out of this in one format or another. The thing that you need to learn if you want to be a real estate investor is, how do I protect myself from tenant nightmares like this? One of the things that I've done to try and protect myself that you can consider is, what type of asset class am I investing in? And that could be, am I investing in apartments? Am I investing in single family homes? Am I investing in self-storage units? Am I investing in industrial buildings? Am I investing in raw land, right? So one of the considerations is, what are my potential risks in the future? If you're investing in homes, if you're investing in apartments, those can be really expensive to fix. Those can be really expensive to rehab and to upgrade. But if I invest in self-storage units, I don't think I've ever spent $7,000 to $10,000 on a self-storage facility because of something a tenant did. I've spent hundreds of thousands. I've spent $250,000 on one property, but that's because the outside was just really dilapidated and the owner let it get there. So I had to go through and paint and replace metal. I guess sometimes the tenants have backed into buildings and I've had to fix it because of that. But those are really, really cheap, fixes, because people who leave things inside of units, leave things inside of self-storage, really all I have to do is, get a pickup truck, throw it in the back of it, take it to the dump and sweep it out. And all my repairs, all my rehab are done. I've really never had anything more extensive, than that. It can happen, but it's very, very rare compared to something like an apartment or a rental house where people could really, really trash it. Another way to protect yourself, aside from thinking about what you're going to be investing in, what type of asset class you're going to be investing in, is, who do I rent to, right? And this is where tenant screening is extremely important. It's extremely important to make sure that your property manager is not only going through and screening your tenants properly, but they're getting references for these tenants and actually calling them. A ton of people get references for tenants, meaning, hey, can you tell me an old landlord you rented from? And they get these references and they don't actually call these references, right? It's just, hey, can you provide a reference? A lot of people write some people down and they never actually call them to understand, is this somebody who I want to let in my property? What do other people say about this? Because if somebody were to call me or my property manager as a reference on that tenant, I would tell that other person, no way should you rent to this tenant because they absolutely trashed my property. But I guarantee you that wherever that tenant that trashed my property is going on to, I bet that landlord won't call the references, because if they did, they would save themselves some headache, because that person is probably going to do exactly the same thing to the next property they go to as the property that I own and what they did to me. So super important to call your references, make sure your property manager is calling the references, and you guys understand what you're getting yourself into with the tenants that you let into your building. Okay. Another thing you can do is just make sure that you make your policies extremely clear with your tenants, and get security deposits to make sure that they, feel some sort of incentive to make sure they keep up with the property and that they're following your guidelines. You want to make sure your guidelines tell them, hey, if you are, if you're going to be renting here, you need to let us know when something breaks or something looks like it's leaking, or when any sort of repairs are needed, you let us know within 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever it may be. Set your policies correctly. Now, of course, I have my policies in place. My property managers have the policies in place. But when you inherit legacy tenants, sometimes it's really hard to change the game on them, right? Legacy tenants can present a risk because they moved in and they've been living somewhere where, hey, this is the deal. This is how the deal has always been. And you come in as the new property owner and you say, well, the deal has changed, right? People don't always like it when the deal has changed. And sometimes, they want to stick it to you as their new owner. A lot of tenants don't like their landlord for whatever reason. And we always try to treat them fairly and with respect. But sometimes people just don't like their landlords, especially when landlords change, when landlords shift. And when policies change, technologies change. If you have a legacy tenant who's always used to paying in cash, no online portals, and if they need something, they call the owner up or text the owner directly. And then when it shifts to, hey, we only take electronic payments. If you need something, use our online portal. And a lot of this are great. A lot of these tasks are great. Great ways to be an efficient property manager, to make sure you're utilizing technologies and systems and processes, which I highly recommend, but you just need to make sure that your legacy tenants are following and adhering to that. And I would say this is a case for me in which they didn't follow and adhere to that. But anyways, I wanted to show you guys what the new property looks like. So here's a couple of pictures of what it looks like. As you can see, it looks really, really nice. Super excited about the extra $3,000 a year just in terms of general cash flow. We've already got the property rented, which is awesome. This is a great area, and I just want to make sure that the money I put into it is something that I could get a return on. So I felt really solid about going in and putting the extra $3,000 to $4,000 from the $67,000 to the $10,000. Want to make sure we felt really good about putting that additional money in there and actually getting a return on that money. So if we look at the extra $3,000, I knew I was going to have to spend $6,000 to $7,000 anyways. So if I knew to put the extra $3,000 to $4,000, that's a 1 year payback, right? That $3,000 to $4,000 that I spent gets paid back in additional rent in 1 year. Plus I get the equity. Plus I get to write all that money off because I put it into the property, right? I'm going to have all that as a tax deduction. All that's going to be taken off, save me some money on taxes. So I'm going to get all that paid back. The property value is going to go up, and I'm going to save some money on taxes. So overall, it was a win for me. But a lot of times people who put money into properties will never see that money back because the tenant has trashed it. So just be careful whenever you're putting money into properties that you have a clear path to getting that money back. If you have to put money into properties and you don't see any rental increase, property value increase, ask yourself, how can I change this money I'm going to spend to where I can make my property more valuable? So that's a super, super critical task. So anyways, I hope this story time was useful for you guys. I hope you can protect yourself from tenant nightmares. You could be like me and only invest in properties where we don't necessarily have tenants, so to say, people who are living there, people who can damage it, or you can, really harden your unit to where it's really hard to damage, but you can always damage a rental property, an apartment. But when you invest in self-storage, when you invest in boat and RV storage like me, it's really hard to damage a property, although it can be done, but we just want to minimize our risk in every single way possible. So hope this was helpful. Check out some of my other videos, share this with a friend, and tell me in the comments about tenant nightmares you might have had. I'd love to hear you guys, love to hear some tips that you have on how to protect yourself from the tenant nightmares because they definitely exist. In the meantime, I'll see you guys in the next video. Check out some other videos on this channel, and I'll see you then.